Small Town Tales podcast is produced by 22 Creations Multimedia, LLC. This is the show where you'll hear paranormal tales, haunting legends, and spiritual insights about the metaphysical world. Explore the paranormal through small town lore with experts and guests from all walks of life. Welcome to Small Town Tales Podcast with C.L. Thomas.
Welcome to this episode of Small Town Tales Podcast. I'm your host, C.L. Thomas. As a little girl, nothing fascinated me more than the fairy realm. Did you know there are more than 30 types of fairies worldwide? Brownies, elves, gnomes, hobgoblins were my favorite. Tonight I speak with artist and writer Hare. Kate Ray is a paranormal investigator and researcher and writer for Haunted Magazine and has been featured in a text about fairies. Her podcast focuses on fairies and what they mean to the ghost hunting community. I cannot wait to talk about that. She often lectures about the paranormal, focusing on her work with fairies. Kate, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me along.
How did you get into the world of fae?
I think it's one of those things that as a child, it was something that was always there. It's something that has never not been there. I didn't have encounters as a child. I'm not somebody who saw fairies as a child. That kind of came actually in my mid-teens. But I never really questioned that there was another realm and another world.
So in your teens, what happened?
Okay, so it was one of those stories that I didn't really tell anybody until it was 10 years after the event happened, because of the ridicule that I had when it occurred. You know, I was in a very sacred place in Britain called the Uffington Chalk Horse, which is a big chalk horse on the side of the hillside in Oxfordshire. And I was with a group of friends. We'd randomly took a road trip out. It was a Friday night. We decided that we were going to do something slightly different with a Friday night. And we drove a good sort of 2.5 hours to this sacred site. We slept in the car. We woke up in the morning. We went up onto the Uffington Chalk Horse, which was an amazing experience. But we decided to walk down. There was an ancient burial site. Well, there is an ancient burial site called Wailing Smithy. And we decided to take I think it's a Roman track that goes between the Chalk Horse and Wailing Smithy. It's very, very old. And it's a very small track, and the sides of the track have built up over time to high banks and then hedgerows on top of these grassed banks. And I'd fallen back from the group of people that I was with, being in a world of my own. The people that I was with were slightly older than me and all male. So I kind of hung back. As I was walking along, I kept hearing what was like the sound of mice singing. That's the only way I can describe it. It was like a really high-pitched melody, but it seemed to be multiple melodies. It was, probably, I would estimate over 20 different voices.
Wow.
And it was coming from both sides of the grass verges, but one side was particularly heavy with the sound of it. And I kept kind of questioning what I was hearing. I'd never heard anything like it in nature before. And as I was walking along, I would stop and listen. And as soon as my footsteps stopped, the music stopped, the singing stopped. And I could hear these things ruffling around in the undergrowth. And I tried on a number of occasions to part the undergrowth and to try and find out what was making this noise, thinking it's got to be an animal. It's got to be something that I've never come across. And eventually I sort of rugby tackled the ground and parted the grass, to which I saw this creature that I described at the time as a gnome, but I now know different, that it was an earth elemental but wasn't a gnome. And it was the shape of a frog or a toad, but had sort of a downy fur on its face and down its back, and a very mousy type face. And I remember thinking, what on earth is that? And the second thought was, it had tweed trousers on. So it had this little pair of trousers on with braces, with little red braces. And it was on all fours, and its head was twisted around looking at me. And I think we perhaps screamed at the same time. So I was like, what is that? And as I said that, it absolutely shrieked so shrill and then darted off. The singing stopped, and I sort of jogged on to the guys who were in front of me, walking in front of me. And I said, have you heard the singing? Did you hear the noises coming from the undergrowth? And they were like, no, what are you going on about? And I said to them, I think I've seen a gnome. Now you can imagine, I was the youngest of the group, and these are older people, and they are literally, they spend a good 15 minutes ridiculing me. It was a torrent of ridicule. So I didn't speak about this again until it was 10 years later. I was in my mid-20s. And I thought, you know what, I have had that encounter. That encounter is important to me. I've held it as a secret for so long that it's part of who I am, and part of, I suppose, my awareness that these things aren't just in the ether. They're not just in the kind of peripheries of our existence. They are actually can be material and part of our world. And when I started opening up about it, I did again receive quite a lot of ridicule, but it bothered me less. I was more mature, and it bothered me. I wasn't bothered. I knew what I had experienced. So that was one of, I've only had a handful of actual physical experiences of the Fae. And that was probably the one that stands out the clearest with me.
I have so many questions just based off of that alone. So many. For one, there seems to be different entities in that realm, all labeled as fairies. Every culture has them, right?
Yeah,
you have
definitely.
Yin, you have, I can't even name them all. Are they all connected in some way?
Oh yeah, definitely. I think when you look at the origins of, sorry, that was my dog barking. When you look at the origins of the word fairy, the word fairy means other. It doesn't mean a particular race, and it was often connected to the realm of the dead. So it was anything that wasn't material in the human material realm. So it's a massive array. I mean, we give the Fae realm, we give entities, the energies in this realm, we give them names because we are predisposed as human beings to categorize things, so to put things into boxes. We're very Darwinistic beings in the fact that we need to understand the world in a reductionist way. In my experience, these energies are innumerable, and they don't often give themselves names, species names. They relate to places, or they relate to jobs that they have, but they very rarely will come forward and say, I'm a gnome or I'm a pixie, unless that they want to convey to us in a way that we understand.
Mm-hmm. So these fae and pixies, that you've seen them in trousers.
Yes.
Are they mimicking humans?
That is a golden question. Question. So further on, the last probably 4 years have been a really intense time for research for me. And the biggest question is, do the Fae present themselves in a way that we can interpret, because they're ethereal beings, that they can manifest their energies into some way that we can then understand? Or actually, do they look like that because of the job or the environment that they're in? I don't know the answer to that question. I think it's probably, I would err on the side of they like to portray to us who they are, so that we have some understanding of who they are and what they do and what realm they live in.
So when you talk about them being as energy, well, we're energy too. Does it work kind of like like mediums, and some people can see the spirit realm and talk to spirits because they're in a different frequency. Is it the same with the fae?
I think so. I think some people have more of a predisposition, but I think for me, I think I was, because I'd started to gain an interest with alongside the paranormal research that I'd been doing. So fairies had always been my first passion, but I hadn't been particularly serious about it until I became a paranormal investigator. I'm very much of the mind of I look at paranormal holistically, and I've completely forgot the track of where where I was going. Then, sorry, could you just recap that?
Yes. So as a medium, when
Oh yes,
mediums,
yeah. Sorry. uh, so I often say that I think we're all born with the ability to have the antennae, if you like, to be able to pick on other realms. You know, as you say, we are energetic beings, and we all have the capability of receiving other energies and understanding other energies. I think some people choose to be more that way inclined, and other people are more wrapped up in the material realm. I don't think either are good or bad. I think that that's just part of the lessons that people have within this life that we're having. For me, I was on a journey as part of being a paranormal investigator to up my skills in mediumship. It was something that I wanted to try and develop. I've always had a sense of my own psychic abilities, if you like, as opposed to my mediumship abilities. And what I was finding, and it became part of the journey of the fae coming into the paranormal for me, that I was getting very few spirits of the dead communicating with me, and lots of these other entities or energies that were coming forward and communicating with me. So I often say that I'm absolutely rubbish medium when it comes to the spirits of the dead, but the fae seem to sort of want to communicate.
that's interesting because for some people it is about self-development. It's not always about portraying a certain ability for other people.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's where it gets confused a lot in paranormal. Sometimes it can be just about you and your own self-development in the
Yeah,
spirit
definitely.
world.
Yeah, definitely agree.
For the most part, though, with the hauntings I've seen that seem to involve elementals and things, people tend to portray them in a negative light,
Mm-hmm.
particularly with interaction with humans. You even have some cultures that label them such, like the Asians. They think yin actually means little demon or something like that, from what I
Yeah.
read. Are they considered some form of demonic entity?
Again, that's a massive question. So for me, the Fey realm span a whole spectrum. So you have those that are upper and more angelic in their energies, and those who are lower vibration in their energies. I think the key is with all cultures. And it's only recently in Europe and in America that the fairies have been seen as something that the whole spectrum's lighter and brighter. Previous to sort of the Industrial Revolution and during in that, and it kind of still filters out today in places like Ireland and Scandinavia. These things are to be respected to the point of fear. You don't talk about them, you don't invite them in. And that's for many, many reasons. They're not there to do our bidding. They're not there to grant us wishes. They're not there to be a companion to the human realm. They have a different set of values, moralities, and what they do. So, in terms of I find it fascinating when you get fae that have attachment to a haunted property, or seem to deal out more malevolent aspects towards human beings. It can be for a wide range of reasons. When I've encountered it, one of the first things that I notice is when you have a property that is haunted by something that's of a darker energy, that then tends to attract in the darker elements. So demonic, no, but the darker end of the spectrum of the fae. And I think that they are more comfortable in that energetic field. I have seen entities and energies from the different realms on the darker side of it actually attached to people. And follow, they can be historic in the fact that they follow ancestral roots down. If they perceive that a person has done them wrong, they will go down ancestrally until the payment is due. I've seen them haunt because people have been disrespectful to the environment. So their malevolence is equated to them being angry at an action that humans have taken. What I will say is, and one thing that I have learned in the whole realm of respecting them, they have very little knowledge of benevolent and malevolent. In the way that human beings think of something as good and bad, it's like asking the animal kingdom, are you good and are you bad? We perceive things like butterflies and fireflies and birds and kittens as good and of light energy, where we perceive things like snakes and spiders and high predators as on the bad spectrum. If you were to actually ask those animals, are you good and bad, they would have no concept of that kind of notion. And very much within the fae realm, they haven't got the same conscious intent that human beings have of being good or bad. They just are. That's just the way they are. So to view them as demonic, for me, demonic is a very conscious energy of evil and malevolence. And it is very aware that that's what its task is and why it's there. Fairies are very different. They don't consciously wake up in the morning and think, I'm going to wreak havoc today. They don't tend to do that.
That's interesting. So it's our energy that can potentially draw them.
Mm-hmm.
Do you
Definitely.
think it's dangerous that it's really trendy right now to have gnome statue? I mean, there's even football themed gnomes in my neighbor's yard over here. Is that kind of dangerous? Is that a way to draw them in?
I think gnomes are very, very different. I've got a bit of a soft spot for gnomes at the minute. The gnomes have been sort of tapping on my psychic door for the last couple of years, and I did have the pleasure of writing for a text about them. And gnomes are not really something that I was ever drawn to, being earth elementals. Their energy was nothing I was drawn to. But in terms of gnomes in the garden, they came about because they were guardians of the garden. And they helped look after the garden. And they're almost act as sort of gargoyles on churches. So they will keep away and defend from any other negative energies coming into the garden. I think when you talk about, there is a massive trend for fairy houses and fairy shrines in the house. That's a different matter. That is a different matter altogether. I think one of the things that people don't realise is the fae realm is such a spectrum. And when we set up these spaces and places and we just say it's just for the fae and we haven't got a specific intention of who we're calling in, and I've said this before in other podcasts, it's literally like going to your front door, opening it and shouting out the front door, who wants a beer? You've got no idea who from the neighbourhood is going to hear you and go, oh, I'll have a beer with you. I'll come into your house. You'd just be wrecked within an afternoon of people coming in. So I think there's nothing wrong with working with the fae, but I think that people have to have a set intention and realise what they're doing it for and how they're going to move that forward, and also realise that there will always be payment of some kind to be had when working with a fae.
It's interesting that you mentioned that you can just open a door and let them in. I wonder if people are doing this to call these elementals into doing biddings against other people. And I'll tell you why. I had a case recently in the paranormal where there was a lady who has a haunted house right in the middle of an almond orchard. And so the house is haunted, and I think it's something that she brought in just through traumas and things like that. So her
Yeah.
house is haunted with human spirits, but this orchard is just something completely different, and which is why I wanted to talk about this today. We went out in this field, and I mean, we're talking acres and acres of almonds. There's nothing around it but almond trees. And I started seeing little 3-foot shadows running across the aisles. It was really heavy. It was not very inviting. It was not human. I'm used to human spirits. This was
Yeah.
just so out of my realm. So I started doing the research behind it, and it turns out that the land actually was Native American.
Mhm.
And so I called a Native American group out of Arizona, and their guy said that the Native Americans who used to live on this land called up the spirits of the earth
Mhm.
to kind of get back at the white men for taking that land, because they literally took
Yeah.
that land off of them. And not only did they take that land, but they used to have hills. It was like a
Mhm.
real hilly hillside. They actually leveled it out to create all of these farms. So this lady has been through multiple deaths in the family. I think she's on her third husband right now, who is currently dying of
Wow.
cancer. She's lost 3 kids, all from, and she believes it's from the house or
Mhm.
the land that the house is sitting on. I guess my question is, it's such a long question. I'm really sorry. What do
No,
you,
it's lovely.
because I know that it's different for each culture.
Mhm.
So this one would be Native American, but are they all connected in some way? And are people using this stuff for evil?
Yeah, again, I don't know whether it's evil in the situation that you're talking about. I mean, my first thought, just going back a little, where you're saying that this woman believes that, the house is having this negative effect. Um, there is something called sick house syndrome, and sick house syndrome is something that is definitely on the scientific spectrum. People understand. They don't quite understand where that comes from. It can come from the energy of the earth. Oftentimes it comes from things that are surrounding that property, and can cause illness. It can actually cause hallucinations, which hand in hand goes with hauntings. Now, whether hauntings trigger it or whether hauntings are attracted to it. In terms of Native American Indians, in terms of natives of the land calling up spirits to bring about that kind of retribution after that kind of desecration happens, or what is perceived desecration. The Fae will only work on that level if they believe that that is a truth of what's happened. So if a land has been taken and destroyed, and especially if you're talking about hills, Fae of all cultures are related to hills and dwelling underground, and will often use hills in the landscape to access this realm. So they'll use them as kind of portals. Is it evil? Again, obviously there was human malicious intent. Is it evil on the part of the Fae? I would be inclined to say no, because what they are doing is they are acting out in anger. Their time frame is very different to ours, so this could span hundreds of years, and for them it wouldn't be that length of time. So they're being on the land and adding to this mix of toxicity could last for a very, very long time. I think in that situation, I mean, it sounds like a super complex case with lots of
Very
multiple
complex.
layers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah. And I think for the complexity of it, that unpicking it's a massive job in itself. And I often say that with all paranormal cases, for however long it's been occurring, you can times that by 3 for you to try and unpick it. So if it's been occurring for a year, it'll take you 3 years to try and unpick it and get back to any kind of level. Yeah, it's a big
Wow.
commitment, a big commitment. I think in terms of the Fae, if they are staying within the orchard, and not going into the property, I would try and communicate with them, because they are quite. Most of them want to talk. Most of them want to tell you why they're there and what their problems are, and getting some form of communication, and definitely on a psychic level, is a very good way of doing it. And they will tell you what they need. They will say, for this to be rectified, and you can almost negotiate with them. If they say, we want the hill back, and you say, hold on, I'm just a human being, I can't put the hill back, but what compromise can we start coming to? And that quell on the outside of the property then might bring down that heavy toxicity within the house. It might help to start dispelling that toxicity. But working with them, I would definitely look at a way of negotiation and payment, and trying to rationalize a situation with them and say, I didn't do this. This is something that happened a long time ago, and I'm sorry for that happening, and starting as that as a base.
So these elementals, are they working under a higher power? Are they that organized, and why are they there, you think?
That's a good question. I do believe that there are lots of different theories, and there are theories that I am more inclined to these days than I was sort of 10 years ago. And one of the ideas is that these are actually connected to all part of our ancestry. So these are energies that were here before human energies, or they were humans when they were alive and have incarnated ancestrally into the fae. In terms of hierarchy, I would be inclined to say that the hierarchy only exists as it does in the animal kingdom. There's not, there's a lot of talk in folklore about fairy kings and fairy queens and kingdoms, and I think that does suit some of the kind of pockets of elements where you've got sort of the Irish elf fae. I would say that kind of hierarchy definitely fits in with that. However, the more earthbound elementals, those that work with within the material realm, I think that they are sentient. En masse, they are sentient. That they move forward because they're compelled to move forward with something.
Can you just talk about some of the paranormal cases that you've been on where you physically dealt with these entities?
I'll talk you through the first one because it's probably the most amusing. I'm sorry, I'm just going to have to shut the door. The dog's barking. So the very first one that was when I was starting to develop as a medium, which I gave up quite quickly, probably about 6 months after I started developing that side of things. I had the pleasure of being able. I'm part of an events group. So we get to go out to lots of different locations. We get the privilege of going around country manors, castles, jails, etc. And we will often go to new locations a few hours early before the public arrive. And it was a great opportunity for me to wander around the building and just try and tune in to any energies that are there. So I had been to this particular building, which was a converted into a hotel. It was at the heart of it was a medieval monastery. This is only in Britain that this could happen. That the ruins of the monastery were then built upon, I think it was the late 1800s. Somebody thought it was a great idea to then expand it out into this country manor. So the exterior is very British, quintessential country manor, but the very heart of it is this. There are signs of a medieval monastery. The exterior windows are now internal. There's all the old stonework, etc. And it had multiple layers of energies within that property. And I tuned into one particular woman. She wasn't very forthcoming. This is in spirit. Wasn't very forthcoming. She just kept saying about money, etc. And it was a bit mundane to me. I didn't. But it was just like, yeah, okay, love. You've obviously passed away being anxious, and but I kept being drawn to the upper part of the building. So we had a historian with us who knew the building very, very well. And luckily, he was very, very open to the ideas of the paranormal. So he was kind of saying to me, yeah, this does happen. Nobody said anything to me until I presented what I was feeling, sensing, or seeing. And we went up to the top of the building, and I wanted to go further up. And I was drawn to a particular corridor that actually had a hatch to the attic. And I said, I want to go up there. I'm being told, to go upstairs. And we went up into this attic, and I had a very skeptical, open skeptic, but very skeptical colleague with me. And as soon as we went up there, I came across this being. Now, I'm sure you're aware of the film The Labyrinth.
Yes,
with
I've
David
never
Bowie.
seen it.
You've got to watch it. You've got to watch it. There are these characters on there that are like, I think they're fire dancers or something like that, and they're very lank, limpy things, very human looking apart from their faces, very pointed and almost bird-like. And I was seeing characters that were very much like this, but had brown shaggy fur covering them, and they one popped out from one side of the attic. This is psychically I'm seeing this, and they started sort of swinging from the rafters and basically monkeying around. Now I was taken aback. This is the first time for me ghost hunting and the fairy realm had collided, and I said, I'm going to say what I'm sensing here. And I remember it coming out my mouth, and the look that I got from my colleague and this historian was like, are you insane? Seriously, are you insane? So I kind of tapped into them a bit more, and they were quite willing to sort of give me tidbits of the kind of things that they were doing. And they talked me through some of the activities that they were doing as part of the haunting in the property. And they thought it was hilarious that people thought they were ghosts. So they would move objects, they would bang on doors, they would open doors, they would wake people up in the night, that kind of thing. And they just thought it was absolutely hilarious. They loved doing it and loved, people thinking they were ghosts. Now, that was the start of a very difficult journey for me, because the cat was out of the bag, really, in terms of I had then spoke out to the paranormal community. I went on to tell other colleagues that evening about what I'd found. And the cat was out of the bag then, and I've never been able to put it back in the bag. And more with these haunted properties, the fae are coming forward, where the spirits of the dead are kind of holding back with me. And it's been something that I've had to, over the last probably 4 years, really accept that that's part of my journey, is to become almost an ambassador for the fae. How we work with them is very, very different to how we work with the dead. And I feel it's very important for me that knowledge is imparted respectfully and responsibly.
It seems like in England, the fae are very prominent anyway in your society. Is that true? More so than the rest of the world. I feel like you guys are more open to talking about fairies and fays, and is that not true?
You'd think so, wouldn't you? You would think so. Yeah, in a sense of when people will talk about the fairies as an idea, as something quite childish, as something from literature and art and from films, you actually start talking about it in a very serious context, in an adult context, and it is incredibly difficult to have those conversations. I don't know about Ireland and Scotland. I think it's probably more, I get the sense that it's easier. My personal experience has been, though, it's very difficult to be taken seriously because of the whole gambit that's attached to the fae. So that whole kind of Disney, Tinkerbell,
Yes.
beautiful little things that are a bit cheeky and a bit sexualized and a bit naughty, but yeah, it's not that easy.
What are some of the other cases that you've been on?
I have. I don't think I've been on a case now where I haven't encountered the fae. It's either in the property or around the property, and I think I don't think it's been an increase of these things. It's just that I'm more aware of these things. One of the cases that really stands out as part of being a paranormal investigator was we have a program here. I know it airs in America, but I don't know on what channels it airs over there. But my boss for the events group that I'm in is Barry Guy, who is on Help My House is Haunted.
Yes, I love Barry Guy. He's a great guy.
Oh, bless you.
I've gotten to
He's
talk to him a
lovely.
few times.
Yeah, he is
He's
a
a really
great
good guy.
guy. Yeah. So I get to work with him, and they had been, I think it was series 2 of Help, and they were at a property, and I got a phone call one afternoon from him and he said, Kate, I need your help. We think we've got fae as part of this, a big part of this haunting. And I said, stop there. I don't want any information. Just send me the front door of the property. So I went away and did an hour and a half meditation where I used that image of the front door to walk through the property. And this is in my mind's eye during the meditation. And as soon as I opened the front door to this property, I had this very small, spiky being. He was probably about 3 foot, literally jumping up and down, whizzing around, just chuntering in a language that I couldn't understand. He was obviously very, very agitated, and he was sort of shaking his fist and then running around, and I eventually got him to calm down a bit. And as he calmed down, his shape started changing to a more humanoid shape. And I got him to, I said, well, you're obviously distressed. You're obviously upset. What's going on? And he just kept saying, it's the trees. It's the trees. They've cut down my tree. And he gave me an image of an orchard that I grew up next to, a house with an orchard. And he gave me that image. And I knew that he was telling me that within an orchard, a tree had been cut down that he was particularly fond of and very attached to. And when that aired out, it had, to fit in with the narrative of the story, that the occupants had cut down a tree at that property, which had added to it. But what we didn't see on the episode was the occupants had lived in France, and they had cut down a tree in an orchard in France, and that's when they started having activity. They had moved from France to England, and that activity had come with them.
Oh, so it followed them.
It followed them because he was so angry, which for me, then I understand now that when I first heard him talk, he was obviously talking in very, very fast, fluent French. And very passionate about it. I mean, one of the interesting aspects about that case, which it just blows my mind, I met up with Barry, I don't know, probably a month after the investigation. We were on an event, and he said, have a look at this. And he showed me pictures that he had drawn one picture, and Chris Fleming had drawn another picture. And Chris's picture, I think this was the way around it went. One of the pictures was this spiky, almost kind of tree-like being. And the other picture was a very sort of stout, fat, Gaulish looking French type figure. And he said, I remember you explaining, but this was, we did these pictures before you explained to us that this thing had these two aspects. Now, I was given the information from this being about how to sort of start remedying the situation, and he wanted a tree planted to sort of start as a way of saying they were sorry for what had happened. And they did that, and it was very, very quiet for a long time for them. But they did contact me probably about a year later and said activities picked up again. And I gave them some advice about things that they could possibly do. And I mean, fortunately, I haven't heard from them again. So hopefully it has appeased this being. But I think he'll probably stick around with him for quite a while because he was that angry.
Why was he angry again? Do you know?
Because his particular favourite tree had been cut down. And he said at the time, they've cut it down not because it was an ill tree or a dead tree. They'd cut it down because it didn't look aesthetically pleasing to them. They just didn't want it there. It was spoiling a view. And he said, "What? You can't do that to trees. You can't just chop down trees because they're spoiling your view, you know." And then coming to this new property, he had been further angered because they'd done the same thing. They'd chopped down a tree in the garden that was spoiling the view of the garden. And obviously these people hadn't learned. In his mind, they hadn't learnt their lesson. And he was just getting increasingly mad about it.
What is the typical response from a homeowner when you go in there and tell them, I think that the haunting is based off of an elemental? What is their typical response?
I think going in with that direct approach often isn't the best way to do it. For me, I think talking about, because often the fae that are in the property will give me snippets of the things that they do. They do like to brag about the mischief that they get up to. And they will also talk to me about other energies that are in the house as well. So I will go from that perspective of, are you experiencing X, Y, and Z? And if I can corroborate with them that is what's happening, that they are experiencing these things, then I'll say to them, I tend to use the term non-human energy. Because saying you've got fairies is a step too far, and people stop listening because their brain just goes into overdrive of, you what? You know, and they're kind of shut down. And the next thing that I tell them is, this is not demonic. This is not from that realm. This is from a different realm. And I'll talk them through before I actually use the word fairy. And I'll explain the word fairy means other, and it doesn't mean, quintessentially winged creatures. A lot of the time, people are more than grateful that somebody believed them and have confirmed with them the activity that's happening in their property. Saying, yes, that does happen, and thank goodness somebody understands and somebody's trying to help us get to the bottom of what's going off. To be honest, obviously because of COVID, and the lockdowns, a lot of the private cases within this country, and I'm sure within America, have tended not to get a lot.
Many,
we couldn't
right.
go out. Yeah. So it is picking back up. And I tend to advise people more than I do actually go into the properties anymore. So I'll have a telephone call of a friend who will say, we've got this going off. What are your thoughts and feelings about it?
This might be a really stupid question, but these fae can shapeshift, they can travel, they're kind of omnipresent, right? They can just be anywhere at any time. So is that how you're able to pick them up over phone calls? Are you tapping into the energy of the client's home, like remote viewing?
Yeah, I think it's partly remote viewing, and I'm sure you'll know about when you psychically read somebody, you can also pick up the energies that are interfering or coming into their energy field as well. So it's a bit of the both, really, and oftentimes it's just listening to the story and finding out what's going on. The fae are omnipresent, however, they are subtly attached to a place or a certain environment, as animals are. So if you take an animal, from the Sahara and put them in the Arctic, they're not going to last very long. And I think that there are fae that are definitely more attached to different landscapes, different energies, and that's where they do the work.
What do you suggest that people do who believe that they're being affected by these entities, but they can't get a hold of any experts that could help them or anyone that could believe them? Are there certain things that they could do on their own?
I think first and foremost, I tend to look back on folklore, and folklore is a great source of ideas and thoughts of ways that we can, and I use the word appease. Getting rid of fairies is not something that I would particularly promote. Whereas with the spirits of the dead, we can use mediumship to move them on to a different plane or help them understand that they are dead and they need to move on. With demonics, we can definitely use more religious-based ways of banishing them. I would definitely say both those things can really aggravate fairies. They get very annoyed when they are perceived to be banished by somebody, and they get very annoyed with it because they believe that they're there for purpose. And if you try to outright get rid of them from a property or from your land, I think for me it would just increase the activity. They become very agitated. They want to be understood. They want to be listened to, and they want to know that you are willing to communicate with them in a respectful way. And that's the first port of call. If you can open up a line of communication. If not, looking back onto folklore, it would be looking back into very basic things. The Irish believe that leaving a bowl of milk on the windowsill at night, or honey or a bit of bread is a really good way of saying, I know you're there. I'm not a foe, I'm a friend, and this is an offering. Even very small offerings, going out into, if you've got a garden or a space around your property, and taking time to really absorb yourself in nature. They really like that. They really like when human beings fall in love with nature and the natural environment, and that often helps them see you in a different light. I have in the past picked out particular trees that have drawn me and use those as fairy trees. So I'll leave nuts, or I'll leave sweets or coins, or tie a bit of a ribbon to the tree by saying, I respect all the natural environment, and I expect respect all those things that are in that natural environment. So if you can't get hold of anybody, I would say that those are the simplest ports of call. It's respect and offerings.
How has the study of fae changed you in the way you look at the paranormal personally?
It's changed me massively, to the point now where I think that a lot of hauntings have this attachment. I would never even, when I became a ghost hunter, if you like, I would never have dreamt that other energies played such a prominent role within haunting environments. It's completely changed my understanding of that. The other aspect of it is it's completely changed, I suppose, my direction within the paranormal community. I do see myself, as I've said, a kind of ambassador. So I started a podcast on YouTube. I started writing for Haunted Magazine, and they're brilliant because they Haunted Magazine, every time I write about the fairies or something that's a little bit off kilter, and I'll submit the article and say, I know this is a bit out there, is this okay? And they're brilliant. They always say, the wackier the better, Kate. So they're really good at sort of supporting me move forward with, I suppose it's trying to ease the community into looking at energies holistically. And the paranormal doesn't mean ghosts. The paranormal means a plethora of different energies and interactions, and so yeah, it's completely flipped me upside down.
So it can also mean self development as well, and self healing. And you're a herbalist, correct?
I am, yes. Yeah.
Among other things, you're also a really great artist.
Thank you. I mean, that's definitely. I mean, my art and the herbs are definitely influenced by the fae. The herbalism, obviously, with the self healing, has come about with, I suppose, a renewed interest within nature for me. And my artwork is about the same time as the fae turned up. I would like to say I became obsessed with mushrooms, but I think mushrooms became obsessed with me. And I sit down to try and draw something or make something or paint something, and it's kind of mushrooms every single time. I kind of, that's the theme that it's taking.
Well, Kate Ray, we're out of time. Thank you so much for talking with us today. What are some of the upcoming projects that you have, and where can listeners find you?
So I'm on social media. I'm on Facebook, Kate Hare Girl Ray. I'm on Instagram under I think it's just Kate Hare Girl. The podcast, my YouTube is Kate Hare Girl Ray again, but can be found by typing in Hare in the Hawthorn. I love talking to people about their experiences. So if anybody wants to sort of chat through, especially when it's fairies that haunt, that's a definite big thing for me. Upcoming projects, I'm in the middle of writing two articles for Haunter magazine. That's kind of predominant at the minute. I'm kind of cutting it close to the bone with that one. There are some kind of bubbling projects going off in the background that I really can't talk about right now. Fingers crossed things will transpire, and the fairies all want that to transpire. I've got loads of different ideas. I kind of let the year weave its way as it wants to. I know that the best laid plans and all that go awry. So lots of different irons in the fire.
Okay, thank you so much again. And this is C.L. Thomas, and you're listening to Small Town Tales.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Small Town Tales podcast. While you wait for the next episode, follow the show on Facebook under Small Town Tales podcast. Learn more about C.L. Thomas at our website, clthomas.org. Small Town Tales podcast was produced by 22 Creations Multimedia, LLC.